Welcome back to the Career Profiles podcast. I'm your host, Sean, and this is part 2 of the Mike Tyson Career Profile. Now, if you've listened to part 1, welcome back. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you, first of all, for those that did comment on YouTube and on Spotify about the episode, and I really appreciate the feedback, and I'm sure Hassan will appreciate the same of all the work that he's put into these episodes also. Now, if you didn't listen to part 1, I'd suggest you go back and listen to it before starting this part, only because we do go into a deep dive about Mike's childhood, how he ends up with Cus D'Amato, and that's where we are up to now going into part 2. So at part 2, we've got him as a fighter who's now entered the amateurs. We're now in 1982 at this point in time, and this is where the story is going to pick up from with this episode. Before I get into it and start part 2, again, as always, please go and subscribe to us on any podcasting app out there. Also, if you've not followed the social media channels, you can do so on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and of course there's YouTube as well to follow if you are following that channel, or if you're not, go and subscribe to that also. All of it really is helpful and supportive to us. So, without further ado, we're going to get back in to the Mike Tyson Career Profile and part 2. Now, going back to the Catskill Boxing Club, and of course at this point in time it was a busy place, day in, day out, 7 days a week. On Sunday the gym was just as crowded as it was on any other day. Most, or at least many, of the young fighters weren't churchgoers, and as John Chetty once said, none of us had any particular religion or went to church. Everyone was too busy training on Sunday. In addition to the guys who worked out regularly in the gym, the Catskill Boxing Club also included one of the few female boxers in the Northeast, a tall, sinewy blonde named Nadia Hushin. Nadia was a dedicated fighter who often climbed between the ropes to spar with the boys, including John Chetty. Now, according to Chetty, she could hold her own in the ring. When the training session ended, the gang often went out to hit the town, which, in Catskill, wasn't really a big hit. The community theatre on Main Street was one of the major attractions in the evening. John Chetty often served as a chauffeur for his brother Chris, Mike, Teddy, and Frankie Minicelli. The 5 of them went to countless movies at the community and accumulated 1,001 unforgettable memories over the months. There were the popcorn fights and the juvenile jokes, the times they chased each other up and down the aisles, to the chagrin and discomfort of the ushers and the patrons, and of course, there were the clumsy adolescent attempts to pick up girls in the darkened amphitheatre. Some of these attempts met with success. Now, despite Mike going out with his brothers from Catskill, he also liked to be for himself. He enjoyed the quiet moments when he could sit in his bedroom alone, viewing the fight films and meditating. He needed time to himself to really recover from the traumatic loss of his mother. He mourned for a long time over the death of her, the person that he loved more than anyone in the world. He felt he had let her down. He had given her numerous heartaches when he was a young street hoodlum, and he wanted so desperately to make up for all the pain he caused her that his sense of grief was even more intense than it would have been under normal circumstances. He wanted to win the heavyweight championship of the world for her, so she could see him become successful and rich, and so he could buy her a big house and lots of clothes. Now those things would never happen. It was too late to make amends. He was left alone now. With his mother gone, with no father, with his sister married and his brother in the Navy, and with many of his friends dead or in jail, his visits back to Brooklyn became fewer and fewer. Catskill, New York became his real home now, and Cus and Camille became his real family, and his only family. Then suddenly, Teddy Atlas also left him. Teddy and Cus clashed violently in late 1982, and Teddy was banished from the Tyson camp forever. Mike Tyson loved Teddy, but he loved Cus even more. Cus was his new father, his family. With the death of Mike's mother, Cus became even more important in Mike's life. Cus became his adopted flesh and blood, his roots, and Mike needed roots. With time, Camille would come to be the mother he sought to please. As Cus and Teddy battled, Mike was forced to choose sides. He chose to stay close to Cus and watch Teddy leave, but watched with a twinge of regret. Teddy was like an older brother to Mike, and to watch his older brother fighting with his father was more than he can tolerate. he watched Teddy depart with a feeling of sadness. For him, it was the end of a cherished relationship. Now, if you're wondering what we're referring to here, we're referring to an incident that took place between Mike Tyson and one of Teddy Atlas's family members. Now, I did cover this in the Teddy Atlas career profile from Teddy's perspective, but now we're covering Mike Tyson's career profile. So we're going to give his perspective on what happened, what led to Teddy Atlas leaving Catskill and Cus D'Amato and Mike Tyson. And this comes directly from his Undisputed Truth autobiography. He said he fucked up. He said Cus was having trouble with his trainer Teddy Atlas, and they were fighting over money at the time. And Teddy had recently married into a family that Cus was really dubious about. So when Teddy needed money, Cus wouldn't give him much. Teddy was struggling, so he wanted me to turn pro so he could collect his share of my purses. But turning pro at that time wasn't in Cus's plan. So it was common knowledge that Teddy was going to leave Cus and that he would try to take me with him. There was no way in the world I would leave Cus. But then I did something that made Cus get rid of Teddy. I had known Teddy's sister-in-law before Teddy even did, and we'd all gone to school together and were friends. The girls would always be flirtatious with me, but I never had a sexual thing with them. I was hanging out with his 12-year-old sister-in-law one day, and I grabbed her butt. I really didn't mean to do anything evil. I was just playing around, and I grabbed her butt, and I shouldn't have. It was a stupid thing to do. I didn't think it through. I had no social skills with girls because Cus kept me in the gym all the time. As soon as I did it, I immediately regretted it. She didn't say anything to me, but I knew it must have made her uncomfortable. Later that evening, my sparring partner drove me to the gym to work out with Teddy. I got out of the car, and Teddy was waiting for me outside, and he looked angry. "Mike, come here, I want to talk to you." So I went over to him, and he pulled out a gun and held it to my head. "Motherfucker, don't you ever touch my sister-in-law." He shot the gun into the air right next to my ear. The sound was so deafening, I thought that he might have actually shot my ear off. And then Teddy ran. I would have too, because the gym was on top of a police station. Whenever Teddy talks about this incident, he makes it sound like he scared me to shit. The truth was, it wasn't the first time someone had held a gun to my head. But it wasn't like I was saying stuff like, "Come on, shoot me, motherfucker." I was nervous. By the way, it took a while for my hearing to come back. But I just felt that I had fucked something up real bad. I really cared about Teddy. I was pissed. And I might have told some people that I was going to get back at him. But I would never do anything to hurt Teddy. He taught me how to fight. He was right there from the beginning. Camille was furious with Teddy. She wanted Cus to press charges and have him arrested. But Cus wouldn't do that. He knew that Teddy was on probation for some other issue and that he would have gone right to jail. Teddy and his family eventually moved back to the city. All this was my fault. I'm just sorry all that went down. After Teddy left, I started working with Kevin Rooney, another boxer who Cus converted into a trainer. Rooney and Teddy were childhood friends, and Teddy had introduced Kevin to Cus. And you can imagine how high the emotions ran when things played out the way they did. So there's Mike's perspective on what happened. Very similar, of course, to Teddy's story, and just a little bit of intricate detail about how Mike perceived it directly from that fantastic book, The Undisputed Truth by Mike Tyson. Now, the perfect cure for those crushing personal losses for Mike was work, hard work, and he committed himself to training with an increased intensity, as if he wanted to prove Teddy wrong. Mike always enjoyed the gym work. He found it relaxing and rewarding. When he worked, Cus was always nearby, studying, scrutinising and instructing. He could often be seen on the apron of the ring, leaning against the top rope, a large 88 decorating the front and back of his blue football jersey. Mike was in the ring working with Kevin Rooney. Cus often had Mike working with small, fast boxers to develop his defensive instincts. The 16-year-old slugger was not allowed to throw any punches during these sessions. He could only bob and weave and learn to be evasive. As Kevin Rooney noted, Joe Frazier would take 1 or 2 punches in order to get in one good one. Mike doesn't take any. Mike danced around the ring, followed by Rooney. Kevin shot out a straight left and Mike easily ducked underneath it. His movement caught D'Amato's eye, and Cus was not happy with what he saw. He said, "You're a little bit square. Your right shoulder should be more forward. So when you're diving in there, there's nothing to hold that blow. You're going to do real damage. You might drop the guy with one punch." You aim the right at his ribcage, and if his guard drops, you bring the same hand up to his jaw. Bang! A left hook to the head. You got a chance to get in 3 perfect punches if he's still standing. Mike demonstrated. Under Rooney's left, pop, 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 right to the ribs, right to the head, left to the jaw. Cus said, that's it. See? There's no way he's going to hit you then, right? Now remember, it's always good to throw the punch where you can hit him and he can't hit you. That's what the science of boxing is all about. Remember, from the side, you can let that punch go with the worst kind of intention because you know he can't hit you back. So you can throw the bomb with all the power you can generate, said Cus. Mike continued to circle Rooney, constantly bobbing and weaving, throwing rights and lefts in clusters, always just short of the mark. As February rolled around, the boxing season got underway with the Western Massachusetts Golden Gloves tournament at the Holyoke Boys Club. Mike had been working hard in the gym, and with his 2 junior Olympic titles in tow, he was already rated as the number 8 amateur super heavyweight in the country. Although still only 16 years old, he tipped the scales at a solid 201 pounds. Cus arrived in Holyoke, fully confident about Mike's chances, but tournament official Mike Burke was sceptical of Mike's ability to handle the experienced fighters that were entered into the open competition. He recommended to Cus that Mike fight in the novice class. He'll get killed in there with experienced fighters, Mike Burke said. Cus just smiled and nodded. Yeah, just watch him. Mike received a bye to the finals of the tourney due to a lack of willing opponents, and on Saturday, February the 12th, he was matched against a tough kid from South Boston named Jimmy Johnson. As with most of Mike's amateur fights, this one ended before the crowd had even settled into the seats. After a few seconds of feeling each other out, the fighters clinched. As they parted, Mike shot a straight right hand that landed flush on Johnson's chin, and the boy from the Southie went straight down and took the full count. Trainer Kevin Rooney was more impressed with the performance than anyone else. He said, he went down like he was shot. It was a perfect punch. Kevin, who was working in his first fight as Mike's trainer, was happy with Mike's emotional approach to the fight. He said, Mike remained calm in this fight. In his past fights, he would start to get excited during the bout, but this time he was calm and cool. February the 12th, 1983, marked the beginning of Mike's maturing process. Mentally and emotionally, Mike was breaking free of the cocoon of his childhood and was moving into the adult world. The teenager was already gaining control of his inner self, a characteristic that would make him doubly dangerous in the future. Some people live their entire lives without harnessing their emotional energy, and this precocious young man was on the road to achieving it while still in high school. Mike's sudden triumph in Holyoke advanced him to the New England tournament only 3 days later. On Tuesday, February the 15th, Mike stepped into the ring in Lowell, Massachusetts to face his semi-final opponent, Jimmy Brisson, from nearby Salem. Brisson, a husky 228-pounder, was very popular around the metropolitan area, but he had never fought a man as deadly as Mike. That Catskill clubber, as he would become to be known by the local sports writers, was intimidating to look at, and he was perpetual motion in the ring. The upcoming encounter began to prey on Brisson's mind. Mike and Rooney themselves were concerned about the bout. They had heard about what a rough fighter Brisson was, and they prepared themselves for a knockdown drag-out battle. As fight time neared, both boxers worked on the mental preparation for the encounter. Mike settled down as the bell sounded for round 1, but Brisson was still agitated, and he started to come unglued immediately. He retreated from Mike's initial thrust, but Mike pursued him around the ring relentlessly, finally catching him on the ropes. A hard right hand to the body followed by a left to the body and a right to the head backed the rugged New Englander into a corner. Several more body shots brought a lack of anguish to Brisson's face and caused the referee to give the injured fighter a standing 8 count. It wasn't enough. As soon as the final count was told, a towel came flying out of Brisson's corner, terminating the battle at the 42-second mark. The next day, Mike was scheduled against Jim Rayburn of Burlington, Vermont, for the New England 5 States Championship. Rayburn had impressed the Tyson camp with his semi-final performance, and Mike and Kevin Rooney were prepared for another hard match. It ended up being easier than they expected. Rayburn had sprained his ankle in the semi-final, and the tournament physician declared him unfit to fight in the finals. Mike, by default, became the New England Golden Gloves champion, a route that was not uncommon to him. Many of his opponents found various excuses to withdraw from the fights. His reputation as an executioner was growing by leaps and bounds. Another walkover in the Northeast Regionals in Ithaca, New York automatically qualified the Catskill clubber for the Golden Gloves National Tournament in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Prior to the tournament, however, the Tyson management team met in New York City to review their fighter's performance. So far, everything looked good. His progress was on schedule. The plan was for him to win a series of national titles, including the Junior Amateur Boxing Championship and the Golden Gloves, then to concentrate on making the Olympic team and winning a gold medal at the 1984 Summer Games. Assuming all went well, Mike would turn pro immediately after the Games and would gear his timetable toward annexing the World's Heavyweight Championship, within 3.5 years making him the youngest heavyweight champion ever. Albuquerque was a pleasant change from the cold, blustery weather that had swept through the northeast in March. New Mexico was warm and sunny, with the temperature hovering around the 70-degree mark. Mike was not on vacation, however. His week was a busy one, with over 32 fighters entered in the super heavyweight division, the cream of the crop from around the country. On Tuesday, Mike faced Ron Williams of Springfield, Illinois. A Mike left hook to the liver demolished Williams in 1 minute and 30 seconds. The next day, Mike was matched with Andrew Stokes of Indianapolis, Indiana. Stokes gave Tyson a battle for more than 6 minutes before Tyson's famous left hook sent him to Never Never Land in the third round. Mike was responding well to his first taste of national prominence and the pressure that accompanies it. He had the usual butterflies before a fight. After all, D'Amato preached that if you don't get nervous, you're one of two things, either dead or a liar. However, when the bell sounded, he was all business, moving smoothly and punching with authority. The quarterfinals were scheduled for Thursday, March the 24th. Big Mike Bradwell of Jacksonville, Tennessee, again carried Mike into the third round, but he eventually succumbed to a numbing left hook to the body. Two-time defending champion Warren Thompson was the only fighter left between Mike and a spot in the finals. To win the coveted belt, Mike had to rise to new heights to conquer this hurdle. Thompson was defiant, but Mike was more than up to the task. In the dressing room before the semi-final encounter, Kevin Rooney gave Mike his final instructions. He said, "Get on top of this guy and stay there. He's got a good right hand and a lot of experience. If you're patient, you'll get a good shot at him and then you'll hurt him." Mike followed the fight plan that Kevin had outlined. He kept his head buried in Thompson's chest for 3 rounds, pummeling the former champion with rights and lefts to the body and not giving Thompson an opportunity to unleash his vaunted right hand. Mike never found an opening to bring down the number 1 seed, but he did keep busy enough to win a unanimous decision and catapult himself into the finals. "It was one of the best fights," said Kevin Rooney. "He did what he had to do." Mike had disposed of 4 foes in impressive fashion, including a victory over the 2-time champion. Now the only obstacle that separated the Catskill clubber from the National Golden Gloves Championship, a 3-round match against crafty Craig Payne. Mike was 9 minutes from glory. His strategy in the final was the same as it had been in the previous matches, to stay on top of his man, to work the body incessantly with both hands and, if an opening occurred, to switch his attack to the head. From Tyson's corner, the fight seemed to go almost as planned. Mike kept on top of Payne and midway through the first round hurt his man with a thunderous right hook. Payne then backed off and managed to dance away from Mike's bullish charges, giving himself time to get rid of the cobwebs. In round 2, a refreshed Payne came back strong to win the round on all scorecards. Tyson appeared to dominate round 3, however, and looked like a sure winner as the 5 judges totalled up the scores. The decision was close, and it was controversial. When the tallies were checked, Craig Payne emerged the winner by a 3-2 count. Mike was crushed. He knew in his heart he'd won the fight, and he couldn't understand how the judges could take it away from him. Kevin Rooney was more than vocal about this, echoing the sentiment of losers from time immemorial. "We were robbed," screamed the frustrated Rooney. "Mike beat the guy, and everyone knew it." The crowd obviously agreed with Kevin because they booed loudly when the result was announced. The silver medal was small consolation for the distraught Mike, but he had learned a valuable lesson in losing that final. Whenever you leave the decision up to the body of a judge, anything can happen, and it usually does. In spite of the loss, Mike's reputation continued to grow in boxing circles. Tom Coulter, director of the National Ranking Committee, noted that Tyson fought 5 of the best super heavyweights in the country and held his own with all of them. Although failing in his bid for the national championship, Mike achieved the number 2 ranking in the country, behind Craig Payne. His star was still in its ascendancy, and his hopes of making the Olympic team for 1984 were not diminished by defeat. As spring settled over the Catskills and the snow disappeared from the landscape, Cus D'Amato drove his young charge unmercifully. He continued to refine Mike's physical skills, but he spent most of his time and effort on the mental approach to the sport. As a break from the taxing training sessions, Mike liked to spend some afternoons with his friends. Now that John Chetty had dropped out of the gym, Mike grew closer to Mike Murphy, and he began spending more and more time at the Murphy house on Spring Street. His first visit to the neatly kept red dwelling was a memorable one. Murph invited Mike over to play hoop one afternoon after school. While Murph went to his bedroom to change his clothes, Tyson settled comfortably into a stuffed chair in the living room to watch TV. As fate would have it, Mrs. Murphy, returning home from work, walked in on the big, rugged black kid sitting in the middle of her living room. Startled by the strange sight, Mrs. Murphy unleashed a blood-curdling scream. The noise not only shocked a young Tyson, but probably startled half the neighbours on Spring Street as well. A flustered Mike jumped to his feet, stammering, "Oh, Mrs. Murphy, hello, I'm Mike Tyson. I didn't mean to scare you." During the rest of the year, Mike became a regular visitor to 207 Spring Street. Mrs. Murphy liked the affable boy giant and enjoyed having him around the house. Mike, for his part, found the Murphy house to be a comfortable place to relax, a safe haven from the pressures of the day. The Murphys had a basketball hoop in the driveway, and the boys played a lot of one-on-one there during the summer months. Jim Murphy, 3 years Tyson's junior, remembered Mike as a player with limited talent, but one who was intimidating. He said people tended to get out of Mike's way when he drove for the basket. Being a 210-pound high school sophomore might have had something to do with that. Mike Murphy was the only one of the crowd with a driver's license, so he automatically inherited the position of group chauffeur. The boys spent many pleasant summer evenings at the local baseball and softball games, rooting for the favourite teams and gorging themselves on hot dogs and soda. And then there were the movies. They were still a popular form of evening entertainment. In addition to the girl hunting trips to the community theatre, the boys could now go to the drive-in by the carful. In spite of a full schedule of mind-boggling academic courses at Catskill High School, and in spite of the tyrannical physical and philosophical workouts under the watchful eye of Cus D'Amato, life was good for Mike in 1983. He was coming into his own emotionally. His boxing career was meeting with astounding success. He had a lot of girlfriends, a great group of guys to hang out with, and a loving family at the Ewald mansion. Mike knew it didn't get any better than this. Cus D'Amato now considered the amateur tournaments to be of minimum value as far as Mike's progress in the ring was concerned. Mike was physically too advanced for the young kids that he met in the junior tournaments, and his skills were rarely tested. Cus felt that Mike could receive a better education elsewhere. In addition to developing his boxing skills in the gym and his practical ringmanship in smokers and club fights, Mike added to his experience by serving as a sparring partner for older, more mature fighters who were entering the professional ranks or who were progressing through the higher levels of the amateur ranks. On one occasion, Mike travelled to White Plains, New York to spar 3 rounds with Carl the Truth Williams, who was beginning to make a name for himself in the professional arena. Williams needed stronger competition than the run-of-the-mill sparring partners were capable of providing, and Mike was happy to oblige. Williams' record as a pro was already 13-0, but that didn't faze the high school kid from upstate New York. Tyson put pressure on Williams from the opening bell and gave the Truth a sound beating to the ribcage. Mike's chin was tested probably for the first time during this skirmish, and Kevin Rooney remembered it clearly. He said, "Michael was coming in, and Williams hit him with a straight right hand. It was like Michael wasn't hit, he just kept coming. An ordinary person would have gone down. He's not ordinary. Needless to say, we didn't get invited back." On Saturday, May 21st, Nadia Highton drove half a dozen members of the Catskill Boxing Club down to the Bronx and parked the old blue Chevy station wagon next to the Apollo Boxing Club on Westchester Avenue. Several of the Catskill fighters were on the card, including Mike, who was pitted against a 22-year-old boxer from the Nassau Police Club, Bill Samo. Tyson would always remember these smokers fondly in the years to come. One of the Catskill contingent claimed that most of their opponents were thugs who just wanted to see how much pain they could inflict on the other guy. Mike admitted that some of those fighters would have scared the guys from his old neighbourhood in Brooklyn. Samo had been fighting much longer than his younger opponent, compiling a 30-6 record compared to Tyson's modest 17-3 mark. It turned out to be a good fight for Tyson because he had to work hard to maintain an advantage. Samo was a rough guy and not the least bit impressed with Tyson's credentials. From the outset, the Samo-Tyson bout was a war, both fighters throwing bombs with abandon. The Nassau slugger was not intimidated by Mike's long list of first-round knockout victims in the junior tournaments. He was determined to welcome Mike to the men's division with a thorough beating. Mike got in several good shots in round 1, but Samo walked right through them and kept the pressure on for a full 3 minutes. Round 2 was more of the same, busy and bloody. In round 3, Tyson's jab began to take its toll on Samo's face, which turned red and puffy. Suddenly, a Mike right hand exploded on Samo's face, splitting open the Nassau man's left eyebrow. Blood spurted freely from the jagged wound, covering both fighters with a sticky red fluid. The referee jumped in immediately, wrapping his arms around Samo to prevent further damage, and awarded a TKO victory to the ecstatic Mike Tyson. While Tyson accepted the accolades of the crowd, Bill Samo retreated to the confines of the dingy dressing room where a doctor took 7 stitches to close the wound. Another Catskill fighter, Frankie Minicelli, also won his fight, a 3-round decision over Bob Strong of Beacon. The boxing world again was saddened on May the 31st as another of its immortals, Jack Dempsey, took the full count at the age of 87. Newspapers across the country headlined the passing of the beloved Manasseh Mauler, a man who epitomised the golden age of sports in America. Together with baseball legend Babe Ruth, football's galloping ghost from Illinois, Red Grange, tennis champion Bill Tilden, and golfer Bobby Jones, Dempsey romanticised sports in America. During the 1920s and 1930s, these heroes were larger than life, idolised by every kid from 9 to 90. Dempsey, a comparatively small heavyweight at 182 pounds, captured the imagination of the American sporting public by recklessly attacking his much bigger opponents, some of whom outweighed him between 50 and 70 pounds, and then battering them into submission. He was a real-life David, and he travelled the back roads of America, slaying the Goliaths wherever he found them. Dempsey held the heavyweight championship for 7 years before yielding the title to a former Marine, smooth boxing Gene Tunney, in 1926. A certain Wilfred Benitez visited the Catskill gym in early June to spar with Kevin Rooney in preparation for his July 16 fight with Mustafa Hamjo. At 17, Benitez became the youngest professional boxing champion of all time. Turning pro at the tender age of 15, he won the World Junior Welterweight title in 1976 with a 15-round decision over Antonio Cervantes. He subsequently added the welterweight title by beating Carlos Palomino in 1979 and the junior middleweight title with a convincing knockout of Maurice Hope in 1982. Another fighter of note visited upstate New York that summer. British heavyweight Frank Bruno was in training at Grossinger's for a July fight against Mike Jameson. D'Amato never wanted to miss an opportunity, arranged for his young charge to spar with Bruno on several occasions, both at Grossinger's and at Catskill. It was a good experience for the up-and-coming Tyson, allowing him to get in the ring and bang away with a world-class fighter. Bruno was a big heavyweight at 6'3.5" at 222 pounds. And he was undefeated as a professional. His record was a perfect one with 16 wins and 16 knockouts. Tyson worked the summer away in quiet solitude, his mind set on only one objective: winning the US Amateur Boxing Championships to be held in Colorado Springs from August 17th to the 20th. As August rolled around, D'Amato entered his boxer into the Ohio State Fair National Championships to gain additional experience prior to the trek to Colorado Springs. Mike reached the semi-finals in Ohio with no competition. Then on August the 13th, he was matched against Jerry Goff from Sana, Mississippi. Goff must have thought he was in the ring with Hercules himself. Mike stormed all over him from the opening bell, pounding him around the ring for the full 3 minutes. Goff miraculously survived the first round onslaught, but how he did it was anyone's guess. He survived for another minute in round 2 before a Tyson right knocked him unconscious at the 1 minute and 12 second mark. Goff was out cold for 10 minutes before he could be revived, and in the process he lost 2 teeth. The sight of the slaughter must have had an unnerving effect on Tyson's opponent for the final. Hugh Copeland entered the ring obviously agitated and nervous the next day. When the bell sounded, he fought like a man in a trance, showing little movement and no offence. A crushing right-hand counter punch by Mike dropped Copeland to the canvas in just 44 seconds of round 1, giving Mike the Ohio State Fair National Championship. 5 days later, Mike was back at the Air Force Academy, seeking the Junior Amateur Boxing Championship. Mike liked the Air Force Academy. It was filled with pleasant memories of happy days. It was the scene of his greatest amateur triumphs, his most exciting knockouts. Fighting in the academy was like having a home court advantage for Mike. He knew that the large crowds attending the fights would be rooting for him. He was a hometown favourite in Colorado. Mike's semi-final opponent was Dave Yonko, a large hulk of a man from Long Beach, California. Yonko, at 6'4" tall and 250 pounds, towered over the muscular Mike. He also tried to outcite Mike with reminders he had beaten the highly touted Henry Tillman in an earlier fight and expected to do the same thing to him. Tyson was unimpressed, to say the least. His only reaction was a shrug of shoulders and a non-committal, "We'll see." At fight time, Mike walked his man down, as he had all his other opponents, and delivered the coup de grace to Yonko at 1 minute 38 seconds of round 1. A left hook to the body and a right to the head. The old 7-2 did the damage. The referee quickly stepped in and stopped the fight without a count after the knockdown. Trainer Kevin Rooney was thrilled at Mike's stunning victory. He said Yonko was an experienced fighter, but Mike came out strong and worked the body well. He scored with a left jab and then worked the combination. Once again, Mike was thrust into a title fight, this time for the Junior Amateur Championship. The man across the ring from him in the finals was Mark Scott of Palm Bay, Florida. But Mike was not to be stopped. A left hook crashed against the side of Scott's head just 54 seconds into the fight. Scott hit the deck so hard there was no count. The referee just walked across the ring and raised Mike's hand in victory. Not resting on his laurels, Mike was added to an international boxing card between West Germany and the United States in Lake Placid, New York in mid-September. Mike was scheduled to meet German super heavyweight Peter Hussing at the Olympic Center on September the 17th. Hussing was an experienced fighter, a veteran of 2 Olympic Games. The 35-year-old strongman won the bronze medal at the 1972 Games in Munich, and 7 years later, in 1979, he won the European Amateur Heavyweight title. Kevin Rooney was slightly on edge about this match. He said, "This will be Mike's toughest test so far. Hussing is an experienced boxer who has fought in the Olympics. I'm sure Mike will be nervous about the bout, but if he can keep calm, I think he'll do okay." After the junior amateurs, Mike's 4th national title, more and more people began to jump on the Tyson bandwagon. The Catskill clubber, although still only 17 years old, was ranked 2nd nationally behind Tyrell Biggs. Tom Coulter, chief of the US delegation to Lake Placid, remarked, "Mike is the best puncher in amateur boxing today. He has great natural ability and instinct, and the ability to knock out anyone. Mike's only drawback in this fight is his inexperience." A couple of days before the match, Tyson, Kevin Rooney and Cus D'Amato made the long trek from Catskill to Lake Placid, about 150 miles up the North Way. Rooney still remembered the recent sparring session between Tyson and Carl Williams. He said, "Mike looked real good against Williams. He was quick and hard to hit. If he can keep his composure against Hussing, it could be a big win for him." Mike's opponent, however, turned out to be someone other than Peter Hussing, who was forced to withdraw from the competition with an injury. He was replaced by a 300-pound behemoth named Peter Geyer. Mike was not intimidated by the size of the walking mountain, even though he was outweighed by almost 100 pounds. He exploded across the ring at the opening bell as if he were fighting Willie Shoemaker. His first wild right missed its mark, but a flurry of lefts and rights left Geyer stunned and glassy-eyed. A straight right hand to the jaw buckled the big German's knees. Referee Heinz Berkel gave Geyer a standing 8 count and then waved the fight to continue. Tyson was on top of his man, immediately backing the wobbly German into a corner. A sizzling uppercut lifted the 6'4" boxer completely off his feet, and the German's corner threw in the towel before their man suffered a serious injury. The time was 1 minute and 47 seconds, and it brought Mike's amateur record to 23-3 with 20 knockouts. Mike was ecstatic and he said, "I knew I was quicker, and if I started quicker and went to the body, I would do okay." Cus was equally impressed with Mike's performance, he said. This was important to his development. Even though the fight itself was not that hard for Mike, the pre-fight experience was helpful. He didn't know who he was fighting, and he had to wait. The pressure was there, but Mike handled it well, as you can see. D'Amato was also proud of the fact that his young protege followed his instructions to the letter and didn't deviate from the battle plan as the excitement mounted. He said, "We could see the guy was big, so we told Mike to go out quick and not let him get started." Mike did, as he was told. As the year wound down, the Mike Tyson camp pointed toward one last summit to scale: the Amateur Boxing Federation National Championships, to be held in Colorado Springs in early November. Kevin Rooney said, "This will be the key to the Olympics for Mike, because the winner will get an automatic berth to the Olympic trials next spring. If he can impress the officials in the ABF, they will help him get the international fights he needs before the Olympics. Right now, they are aware of him, and they're waiting to see if he will be the Olympic heavyweight." Cus D'Amato worked feverishly to schedule some fights for his boy wonder in Catskill, but no opponent could be found. As a result, Mike had to content himself with the drudgery of gym work and some infrequent sparring sessions. In October, the Adirondack Regional Golden Gloves Tournament was held in the IUE Hall on Ayer Boulevard in Schenectady. But, as usual, Mike found himself alone in the ring when the bell sounded. He won in a walkover. Kevin Rooney said, "Nobody wants to fight Mike. The trainers don't want their kids to get beat at local level. But even though this might be good for Mike's ego, we wish we could have gotten a fight. It's better for him if he gets experience. We hope Mike gets a fight in the States, but we wouldn't be surprised if he didn't. Hopefully, he'll get at least one fight before the Nationals." On October the 22nd at Lake Placid, New York, this was the New England-New York Olympic Regional Boxing Trials, and once again the lonely man of amateur boxing stood alone in the centre of the ring, just him and the referee. Another walkover advanced Mike to the ABF Nationals. He would be making another long journey to the Air Force Academy, but unfortunately, he wasn't getting any experience along the way. Cus D'Amato tried to compensate for this sad state of affairs by intensifying Mike's sparring sessions. Phil Bazooka Brown, a rangy black heavyweight with the build of an Adonis, was brought in from California to lean on the smaller fighter and test his potential. The Louisiana slugger possessed an outstanding professional record with 21 wins and 2 draws in 23 bouts, 15 of the wins coming via way of knockout. He was favourably impressed by Mike's ring savvy. He said, "I've been a sparring partner for Ken Norton, and I've beaten Ronaldo Snipes and James Quick Tillis in the amateurs, and I know Tyson punches harder than any of them. He's young, strong, and a comer. I don't see how anyone will beat him in the Olympic trials." Brown's manager, Ron Lovellner, agreed. Mike Tyson is the best amateur fighter in the United States and will represent the country in the 1984 Olympics. Mike himself was confident as the ABF tournament approached. He said, "It doesn't matter who I have to go through, I'm going to win this tournament." The tournament in fact turned out to be a star-studded event. All the top amateur heavyweights in the country were entered, including the flashy Tyrell Biggs. Also present were Craig Payne, who had decisioned Tyson in the finals of the National Golden Gloves tournament just 7 months previous, and Al Evans, the only man to knock out the Catskill clubber. Still, Mike exuded an air of confidence when he was interviewed by the local media. He said, "The competition doesn't matter to me because I think I'm the best super heavyweight in the country. Now I get a chance to prove it. I've just finished sparring with one of the top heavyweights in the country, Phil Brown. I haven't been hit hard in most of my fights, but Brown came right after me and landed a lot of solid body blows. I wasn't used to that." Tuesday, November 8th arrived, and Mike was in the ring again in the opening round of the American Boxing Federation National Championships. This time, an opponent stared at him from the opposite corner, a journeyman fighter named Kamel Odom. The details of the fight are hazy, but what is clear is that Mike Tyson was disqualified in the second round. His manager, Cus D'Amato, back in Catskill, was dumbfounded after his telephone conversation with Kevin Rooney in Colorado. "I think they said Mike was holding, which I don't understand. This Odom is probably the weakest fighter in the class, and I can't really explain it, except that Mike is out of the tournament. These things happen in boxing. Now we have to go back to the gym and work." It was one of the low points in Mike Tyson's career. He was down, but not out. Cus picked him up, brushed him off, and started to rebuild his confidence. Mike was showing the first signs of maturing under D'Amato's patience guidance. A setback such as he experienced in Colorado would have completely destroyed him emotionally only a short time ago. Now he was able to assess the reasons for his loss, to correct the deficiencies, and to forge ahead. Now a defeat was no longer the end of the world, but rather a temporary obstacle that he had to overcome. The days ran into weeks, and the Tyson Championship Express was put back on track by the deft hands of the crafty old trainer. During 1983, the relationship between Mike and his mentor had grown steadily stronger. Mike's thick shell of suspicion and mistrust was still evident in his daily relationships, but it was beginning to show some cracks in its steadfastness. In the 3 years since Mike had moved into the big white house on the river with Cus and Camille, he had progressed to the point where he was just now beginning to feel comfortable with them. The threesome was slowly but surely becoming a family. Mike was no longer the loner he had been when he first arrived in Catskill. Gone was the sullen youth who had slinked into the old house back in the late summer of 1980. In his place was a more relaxed individual, a growing boy who was outgoing and friendly. Rather than sitting quietly at the dinner table as a casual observer, Mike was now a major participant in the activities. Dinner had developed into a warm, relaxed time in the old house, and Cus felt a sense of satisfaction at the improvement in Mike's demeanour. He sensed that at last Mike was becoming his own man. If he continued to mature at his present rate, Cus was confident that he could handle the inevitable media pressure that would accompany his rise to stardom in the professional ranks. Mike's self-esteem had also increased tremendously since he came under the influence of the white-haired wonder-worker. The private tutor that Cus had hired had improved Mike's reading capabilities and his language skills to the point where he was on an equal level with the rest of his age group. Cus's words came back to him as he remembered the progress that he had made in the past 3 years. There are no stupid people, only disinterested people. Cus was right, and Mike smiled to himself as he thought about it. It was a cool grey winter morning as the old man and the young man emerged from the big white house on the river. They headed down the driveway as the first rays of light broke through the trees along the Hudson, walking slowly and leisurely and talking softly to each other as they entered the old dirt road. The one dressed in baggy pants and a blue football jersey sporting a gaudy number 33, and the other comfortably attired in a loose-fitting grey warm-up suit. A half-breed mutt trailed obediently behind, and their conversation touched on most of the important subjects of the day: girls, life, death, truth, belief, dedication, and boxing. In the end, the conversation always returned to boxing. Cus touched on a new lesson each day, and he impressed upon Mike the importance of maintaining an honest relationship between fighter and trainer at all times. He said, "You can't lie. You can never lie. Lying is the worst thing a fighter can do, because if you lie, I can't teach you nothing. If I tell you to do one thing in the ring and you do something else, I can't teach you." Cus's lectures were non-stop, and they dwelled on the secret to success as Cus saw it. And this is what Cus said to Mike that day. He said, "In any endeavour, you have to feel you're going to be successful, in order to be successful." Boxing is the same way. Now, if a fighter allows himself to think about losing, he can never become a success. No matter how much talent he has, he'll never realise the talent, because the thing that makes you a champion is not necessarily the talent. I've known of fighters who have won championships, who were crude in effect, but they had such determination and will to win, and competitive spirit, and they fought with such enthusiasm that they overcame skill. In fact, I have a saying, and it goes something like this: when you're watching a fight, you're watching more of a contest of will than skill, with the skill prevailing only when the skill is so superior that the will is not tested. If a man fails, he only fails because he didn't believe. You got to believe in yourself, in everything you do in life, even boxing. If a fighter goes into a fight and he believes he's going to win, he will win. He may have other qualities to overcome the skill, but he will win. See now, there is no difference in what you do and where you do it. If you go in with the enthusiasm, the trust, the desire, you will win. The mind always wins over the body. Take knockouts for example. 90% of knockouts are not knockouts. What you witness as a knockout is a silent acknowledgement that he no longer wants to continue. That's what it means. The winter of 1984 was a time of reflection for Mike and his strategy team. coming off a busy 1983 where Mike broke into the amateur ranks under a full head of steam, compiling an impressive 12-2 record and carving out a big reputation for himself in the process. The Brooklyn teenager had acquired a considerable amount of experience over the previous 12 months, fighting a variety of opponents with different styles and physical attributes. He had advanced to the finals of the National Golden Glove Tournament in Albuquerque, New Mexico, before losing a close decision to Craig Payne, an admirable feat for a boy of 16. His only other loss of the year came on the strange disqualification to Camille Adom in November. Even his losses provided valuable experience for the rapidly developing Tyson. If 1981 and 1982 were young Tyson's kindergarten years in amateur boxing, and 1983 represented his high school training, and the year ahead would be his college education, preparatory to entering the professional field. Two major objectives lay ahead for the Catskill Dynamo that, when achieved, would make his name a household word across America and would vault him into the professional ranks by the end of the year, with a large asking price on his head, of course. The first objective was the National Golden Glove Tournament to be held in St. Louis, Missouri in April. Having narrowly missed out winning that title in 1983, Tyson was now ready to claim the jackpot 1 year older and more mature with considerably more experience. The second objective, and by far the most important, was to qualify for the Olympic Games in Los Angeles in August. With his impressive amateur record, Mike was favoured to represent the United States of America in the heavyweight division. Mike was geared for the competition. His heart was already set on winning the coveted gold medal, and he had been fantasising about the matches for months. In the romantic eyes of the 17-year-old athlete, nothing was more important than representing his country in the world's most prestigious international sporting event, and winning impressively against all competition, including the highly respected Cuban and Soviet boxers. He dreamed about standing on the podium to accept his gold medal, while the strains of the American national anthem echoed in the background, and the stars and stripes rose majestically in the quiet California air to fly above all of the flags in the arena. The thought of such a glorious day brought tears to the eyes of even a sensitive Mike Tyson. Before such things could be accomplished, however, a lot of hard work remained, including a strenuous gymnasium program complete with calisthenics, bag work and countless hours of nerve-wracking and body-punishing ring work. The brutal regime also included 7 days a week of discipline-building road work, plus regular psychological sessions with Cus D'Amato and John Halpin. Dr. Halpin, a graduate of St. John's University, had practiced hypnosis in the city of New York for 35 years. He and Cus had met for the first time in 1971, and they quickly discovered they had a common interest, a study of the subconscious mind. The two men immediately began to use Dr. Halpin's speciality to delve deep into the intellect of Cus's boxing hopefuls in an effort to make them relax more, control their natural fear and improve their concentration. Dr. Halpin started working with Mike soon after the former juvenile delinquent was released from Tryon School. He and Cus utilised hypnosis to cleanse Mike's mind of the subconscious scars of his childhood years. Sometimes Mike and Cus would travel to New York City to Dr. Halpin's office, while on other occasions Dr. Halpin would make the two have a drive to Catskill, combining the hypnosis sessions with a relaxing weekend in the country. Dr. Halpin started working with Mike in 1981, and their meetings continued at regular intervals for the next 5 years. After the good doctor put Mike under hypnosis, Cus would go to work on his psyche. Always be relaxed when you fight. Don't get personally involved. Stay detached. Block out everything except the fight. Concentrate only on your opponent. Don't allow yourself to get tired during a fight. And so it went. The duo of D'Amato and Halpin always striving to improve Mike's mental attitude and to stabilise his emotions. Mike loved the activity of the gym, and the effort, the sweat and the physical abuse you put your body through. But he also enjoyed being a teenager, and after a vigorous workout he often met his friends next door at the Village Pizza for a quick snack. He usually consumed 2 large slices of cheese pizza and a Sprite, while the conversation turned to the usual teenage subjects of fast cars and fast girls. Mike liked both of them. He had his share of girlfriends, and he did enjoy playing the field, but he spent most of his time with Angie. As far as Cus and Kevin were concerned, playing the field was safer for a boxer. No commitments, no complications. When asked about his off-duty activities one day, Mike emphasised his appetite for junk food. He said, "I'm just a normal teenager. I have friends I like to hang out with and have a good time. I like girls and junk food, but instead of drugs and booze, I get high pigging out on pizzas, banana splits, Whoppers and Big Macs, and I wash them down with Sprite and ginger ale. Mike was still a child. He was only 17 years old, but destiny would force him into manhood before his time. The spotlight and the pressures of being a celebrity would increase by leaps and bounds over the next 2 years, and Mike would lose his privacy and his childhood in his quest for the heavyweight boxing championship of the world. Would it be worth it? Only time would tell. February marked the beginning of Mike's quest for the National Golden Gloves Championship. His first challenge was an easy one. On February the 18th at Queensborough High School, he won his match in another walkover when no opponent was courageous enough to trade punches with the Catskill clubber. After the no fight, Mike returned home to his mentor to renew his physical training and to continue to work on his mental approach to the sport. Cus and Mike took their usual early morning walks along the dusty lane that led from the Ewald house to Fort Road. The damp mist of early March chilled their bones as they walked, the 76-year-old man and the 17-year-old boy in perfect harmony with each other. The old man in the blue and white football jersey spoke endlessly to his charge, imbuing the boy with his philosophy of positive thinking, and the young boy listened quietly and attentively, occasionally nodding in agreement at the man's statements. In the gym, the same scenario was evident. The teacher, in his usual pose leaning over the top strand of ropes, carefully studied his student as the boy went through his boxing routine with trainer Kevin Rooney. Every so often, something would catch the old man's eye, a weakness in the boy's execution, the beginning of a bad habit. Just something. As soon as he spotted an imperfection, the old man would interrupt the action, point out the mistake to his protege, explain the consequences of making that mistake, and then instruct him in the correct way to execute the movement. 2 hours of gym work did not complete the student's day. It only ended his classroom work. His homework continued on into the late afternoon and early evening hours until it was time to turn in. At dinner, the family discussions usually revolved around the fight game, life in general, and the close relationship between the two. The old man would regale his audience with tales from his own life, his childhood, his boxing champions, and his confrontation with the mobsters of the IBC. After dinner, the old man would settle into a chair in the upstairs bedroom, and the two of them, man and boy, would watch fight films together. The schoolwork continued as the teacher carefully dissected the strategies of each of the combatants, explaining the ebb and flow of a fight in great detail. The boy just sat on the floor, eyes fixed on the movie screen, enthralled by the boxing expertise that was hidden beneath the frail veneer of the old man. He was convinced that the old man knew more about boxing than anyone alive, so he listened intently. He absorbed the knowledge and retained it. Cus D'Amato, in turn, loved his young charge. He had seen the boy grow from a street thug to a decent young man. Once, he explained the boy's development to a friend, and he said, "I believe that all the boys brought up in the environment that he did would require help, patience and understanding. I tried to make him feel, and I hope I did, that I understand this kind of life. I grew up in a tough neighbourhood, myself, and having watched him come from where he was to where he is, I have a deep affection for him. I do." Cus also confided another secret to his friend, and this is what he said. "If he weren't here, I probably wouldn't be alive today. The fact that he is here and doing what he's doing, and doing as well as he's doing, and improving as he has, gives me the motivation and interest to stay alive. I believe a person dies when they no longer want to live. Nature's a lot brighter than people think. Little by little we lose our friends that we care about, and little by little we lose our interest until finally we say, well, what the devil am I going to do around here? We may have no reason to go on. I have a reason with Mike, and it gives me the motivation to stay alive, and I will watch him become a success, because I will not leave until that happens." During March, the Tyson Strategy Committee made another momentous decision, one that would have serious ramifications before the year was out. Mike's managers decided that he would compete as a heavyweight in the upcoming Golden Gloves tournament and the Olympic trials. This decision meant that Mike would have to box well below his optimum fighting weight of 210 pounds. The limit for heavyweights was only 201 pounds, or 9 pounds below Mike's best weight. The super heavyweight division was for a weight class above 201 pounds, and it was presently dominated by Tyrell Biggs, supposedly the preferred choice of the Olympic Boxing Committee. Biggs had been carefully groomed as America's super heavyweight challenger, competing in numerous international matches against the world's top super heavyweights, including Cuba's Teofilo Stevenson. As Mike warmed up in his dressing room before his final match in the New York State Golden Glove tournament, trainer Kevin Rooney explained their position to the press. He said, "We didn't want to fight the Olympic Boxing Committee. They've made up their minds. They want Tyrell Biggs for the super heavyweight. So we decided to drop down and try the heavyweight class. I think we should have a good shot at that." Mike's opponent in the final was Mark Pettinato of Endicott, New York. The result was a knockout victory for Mike at 1 minute and 6 seconds of the first round. Kevin Rooney said, "Mike came out strong and was slipping and hitting well. He was working the body and put Pettinato down for an 8 count. When he got up, Mike hit him with a left hook to the jaw that knocked him out. Mike looked real good. He was moving a lot and boxing, not just throwing wild punches." So much for the New York competition. From here on, the opposition would get tougher. The next stop was St. Louis, Missouri, and the Nationals beginning in just 13 days. Mike had many things on his mind as the tournament approached. He would have to win 5 tough matches within a period of 5 days. Not only would he have to exhibit superior skills in his matches, but he would have to be lucky as well. A cut of any kind, whether from a punch or an accidental headbutt, could end his quest prematurely. But Mike wasn't concerned about luck. Mike was thinking about making his own luck. His attention for the previous 2 months had been focused on only one thing: winning the tournament. Now, April 17th, he was in St. Louis and ready. The 1984 Golden Glove tournament was held in Kiel Auditorium, and it drew one of the strongest boxing fields in history. Among the favourites was Henry Milligan, rated as the #1 amateur in the country. The #2 amateur heavyweight, Olin Alexander, was also entered. Tyson was oblivious to the quality of the field. Since he considered himself to be the best amateur heavyweight boxer in the world, everyone else was just an opponent to him, someone who had to be dealt with on his road to the championship. He was soft-spoken but confident in his assessment of the situation when he said, "I'm going to knock everyone out. I don't care who's there. It really doesn't matter to me. I'm going to fight everyone the same way." Trainer Cus D'Amato and his assistant Kevin Rooney had been working Tyson mercilessly for the 2 weeks prior to the tournament. Cus had brought in a powerful young professional fighter named Jimmy Clark to spar 3 rounds with Tyson every day. Clark, from Providence, Rhode Island, stood 6'3" tall and tipped the scales at a solid 215 pounds. He had a professional record of 13 wins with no losses, and 12 of them wins coming by knockout. And he gave Mike a good workout in the gym, and D'Amato was pleased with what he saw. He said, "Mike looked really strong against Clark. He's ready for the Nationals. If he wasn't, I wouldn't put him in the tournament. His only drawback continues to be inexperience. We have a hard time getting anyone to spar with him, so he hasn't had the ring time he needs." On April the 15th, 2 days before the start of the tournament, the Tyson entourage, consisting of Mike, Cus and Kevin Rooney, boarded a plane at Albany Airport and set out for St. Louis. Horace Greeley, a 19th century politician, when discussing the opportunities that existed in this land of plenty, once exhorted a fellow legislator, "Go west, young man, go west." Over 100 years later, Mike took Horace Greeley's advice. He headed west in search of fame and fortune. After 1 day of leisurely gym work, Tyson began his drive to the championship. On Tuesday, April 17th, he disposed of Roger Peppel in 1 round. The next day, the Tyson Express polished off Derek Iserman, also in the first round. And on Thursday, in the quarter-final match, Mike met Johnny Williams of Chicago. Williams, as it turned out, was no more of a puzzle to the Catskill clubber than his previous 2 opponents. Midway through round 1, Mike caught Williams with a short right to the chin that stopped the Chicago boy in his tracks, causing the referee to give him a standing 8 count. As soon as the action resumed, a vicious Tyson left hook found its mark on the right side of Williams' face, dropping him for the full count at the 2 minutes and 15-second mark. The knockout brought Tyson's tournament record to 15-3 with 11 KOs. Trainer Kevin Rooney was satisfied with Mike's performance when he said, "Mike is looking very strong. He's very confident, and I think he'll win the tournament." The tournament continued at a frenzied pace. Although Mike had 3 fights in 3 days, there was no let-up. He was right back in action on Friday in a semi-final match with Richard Johnson, a scrappy Texan from Fort Worth. Johnson was getting a lot of press around St. Louis because he had eliminated the pre-tournament favourite, Henry Milligan. He was confident coming into this bout, while Tyson was a little bit apprehensive. Mike paced the locker room nervously in the minutes before the fight. He worked hard to keep his emotions under control and tried to concentrate on nothing but his fight plan. As he climbed the steps to the ring, Mike still appeared to be agitated, but he was gradually getting himself under control, and by fight time, his nervousness had been replaced by a feeling of a quiet determination. When the bell rang, Mike was composed and anxious to get it on. In typical Tyson fashion, he stalked his man from the outset, trying to manoeuvre him back against the ropes. Mike's aggressive posture and deadly punches gave him rounds 1 and 2 on all scorecards. In round 3, Tyson came out firing, looking for another knockout. He kept the pressure on constantly and eventually dropped Johnson with a sizzling left hook flush on the button. A left-right combination put Johnson down a second time, and a crushing right ended the competition only 45 seconds into the round. Mike's opponent in the final was none other than Jonathan Littles, an old friend from the Junior Olympic days. Mike had KO'd Littles in the second round of the 1982 tournament in Colorado Springs. As usual, Mike was fidgety before the fight, but not as bad as he had been before the Johnson fight. He knew Littles, and he had no doubt he would KO his man again. But still, he beat Olin Alexander, one of the best heavyweights in the country. So, I was a little nervous before the fight, but when I got into the ring, I said to myself, in the ring, I'm the king. And the king he was. He came out winging, throwing punches in a never-ending assault on Littles' body. A left-right combination early in the round put Littles down. Tyson waited patiently in a neutral corner as the referee told the count, and then got right back on top of his man when the referee waved the fighters together. Within seconds, the ref was forced to give the helpless Littles a standing 8 count. Still later in the round, Tyson had his man in trouble again. This time, the referee stopped the fight. Mike was declared the winner after a hectic 2-minute, 4-second mauling of a greatly overmatched Jonathan Littles. The young New Yorker assessed the fight candidly for the men of the press. He said, "It was really tough, but I hurt him the first time. He jumped right up, but I knew I had him. He was trying to bluff me, but I kept throwing punches. He wouldn't go down, but he was hurt." Not only did Mike win the gold medal in the heavyweight division, but he also walked away with the trophy as the most outstanding boxer in the tournament, an award that caught the ecstatic Mike by surprise. He said, "I knew I was the best fighter there, but I wasn't really expecting to win most outstanding boxer trophy. The tournament had some of the best fighters in the world. I can't really describe how great it was when they called my name." As happy as Mike was over winning the tournament, he realised it was just one step along the path to boxing immortality, and he had a long way to go yet. He said, "Winning this tournament was very satisfying, but it's only the first step. The next step is winning the Olympic trials, and then I want the gold medal win in Los Angeles. Anything less would be a disappointment. I know I'm the best heavyweight in the world, and now I want a chance to prove it." He was queried at some length by the newsmen, particularly about his probable opponents in the Olympics, those rough, tough boxers from Russia, East Germany, and Cuba. Mike just shrugged when he thought about it. He said, "They're just boxers like I am. When we step into the ring, it doesn't matter where we're from. Only who's the best fighter. I'm the hardest puncher in my division, and I'm very confident about the future." Cus D'Amato didn't let his protege rest on his laurels for very long. He didn't want Mike to get too used to his newfound celebrity status, a situation that could easily go to a young boy's head and upset his social values. So Tyson was whisked quickly back to Catskill, New York, and into the humdrum world of the gymnasium, the drills, the sparring sessions, and the monotonous road work. Only a few days removed from being the toast of amateur boxing in America, Mike Tyson was again a student, trying desperately to please his teacher. In early June, the Olympic boxing trials would be held in Fort Worth, Texas, but a 7-week layoff was too long as far as Cus D'Amato was concerned, so he entered Tyson into the National Police Athletic League tournament in Niagara Falls, New York, in late May. Mike's first bout, a quarter-final match, was held on May the 29th. His opponent, Jeff Thompson, was a perfect test for him. Thompson was an experienced fighter with over 100 fights, and to top it off, he was a southpaw, and an orthodox fighter who confused and frustrated his foes. No one liked to fight southpaws because southpaws usually made their opponents look bad. Mike Tyson was no exception. This was his first fight against a southpaw, and Mike didn't know how to manoeuvre against this type of a fighter. As a result, he looked very clumsy in the first round as he tried to figure out a way to bypass Thompson's right jab. In round 2, Mike felt a little more comfortable and started getting inside Thompson's defences. Near the end of the round, Tyson unleashed a left-right sequence that sent Thompson sprawling. The round ended before Tyson could finish the job, but the anticipation was there. Mike knew it was just a matter of time now, and he nervously waited in his corner between rounds, pawing the canvas with his foot like a chained animal, waiting to get at a raw piece of meat. When the bell sounded for round 3, Mike bolted across the ring, throwing punches from all directions. He dug a hard left to Thompson's body and followed it up with a right to the head. Thompson went down for an 8 count. As soon as he arose, Mike was there to greet him. A left to the head and a strong combination of lefts and rights to the body took the wind out of Thompson's sails. He hit the floor again, but like a courageous gladiator, he dragged himself to his feet, barely beating the count of 10. It was bravado, in the finest sense of the word, but it was also foolhardy. Thompson was standing erect on unsteady pins, and the bronze executioner stood before him, poised for the kill. It was quick, but it was not painless. Tyson sent 2 crushing left hooks to the side of Thompson's head, causing the old warrior's eyes to roll in the sockets. The glassy stare saw nothing but darkness as the fighter pitched forward on his face. It was 1 minute and 38 seconds of round 3, and the fight was over. Tyson's tournament record now stood at 18-3, with 16 knockouts. Tyson's semi-final opponent was scheduled to be James Thurber of Wisconsin, but Mike had developed a sore shoulder in the Thompson fight, and the thought of an incapacitating injury sent shivers through the Tyson camp. D'Amato didn't want to take any chances of knocking his heavyweight contender out of the Olympic trials. When the shoulder did not respond to heat treatment the following morning, Tyson withdrew from the competition to rest his aching muscles. Back in Catskill, Mike dropped by the Murphy home to talk with Mike and Jim. According to Jim, he stopped over the house just to hang out. He didn't want to go out. More than anything else, it was a sad goodbye visit to his companion of 4 years, Mike Murphy. Tyson and Murphy had been close for a long time, but now it was almost over. Mike was graduating from Catskill High School soon, and in September he'd be starting his studies at the Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York, majoring in business with a minor in marketing. Things would just never be the same again for the 2 Mikes. They would surely drift apart, as most high school buddies do, but they would also have the memories of the good times together, and with a bit of luck, they might meet again to renew their friendship sometime in the future. 4 days later, the New York State boxing contingent boarded a jumbo jet in Albany and flew west to Chicago, then south to Fort Worth, Texas, to keep their date with destiny. The next 4 weeks would determine who represented the United States in Los Angeles. It was time to separate the men from the boys. Mike's shoulder was still sore, but it was healing, and apparently it wasn't a serious injury. D'Amato made sure of that. As soon as Mike withdrew from the PAL tournament, Cus rushed his valuable property to New York City to have his shoulder checked out by not 1, but 2 orthopaedic specialists. Both doctors concurred in their diagnosis. After thoroughly examining the shoulder and reviewing the x-rays, they declared the problem to be nothing more than a slight muscle pull. Mike was advised to rest the shoulder for a couple of days prior to his upcoming matches. When Mike, Kevin Rooney and Cus D'Amato arrived in Fort Worth, it was Sunday afternoon. They had a day and a half to rest and to get organised before the hurly-burly of the tournament began. Mike did his normal road work and some calisthenics on the Monday, but he also took a lot of time to relax and adjust to the Texas environment. On Tuesday, the turmoil began in earnest. After the road work and the gym session, there was an organisational meeting conducted by the Olympic Trial Committee to familiarise all the participants with the details of the tournament and to select a draw. There were 8 fighters in each weight class. Quarter-final matches were scheduled for the Wednesday, Thursday and Friday, with the semis on Saturday and the finals on Sunday. ABC television was broadcasting the big matches on Saturday and Sunday. Mike not only had to contend with his opponents during the week, but also had to deal with heavy media pressure as well. As a 2-time junior Olympic national champion and reigning Golden Gloves national champion, Mike was a genuine celebrity, perhaps the most famous amateur boxer in America to the boxing community. But Tyrell Biggs was better known to Mr. and Mrs. John Q. Public. The Olympic Committee had been grooming Biggs to be the American super heavyweight representative in the Olympics for some time, and had provided him with a heavy dose of international competition, plus the national television coverage that went along with it. Tyrell Biggs was an early product of the television industry, one of the so-called media darlings. Mike was a fighter, and only a fighter. He fought with less fanfare than Biggs, but the men of boxing's inner circle knew him well. He was rated number 1 in the country, yet in spite of his stature, Mike Tyson was entered in the heavyweight division rather than the super heavyweight division, so as to not confront the Olympic Committee's fair-haired boy, Tyrell Biggs. Being in the heavyweight division meant that Mike had to shed 10 pounds in order to come below the weight limit of 201 pounds. Cus D'Amato had to protect his boy from the press 24 hours a day. It was certainly necessary to grant a certain number of interviews, but the constant demands of the media could be devastating to a young fighter if they were allowed to go unchecked. Cus saw to it that was kept to a minimum. Mike's first match on Thursday was against Avery Rolls, and he came out like he wanted to end it quickly. He rushed his man at the bell and unleashed a solid right to the ribcage, followed by a left to the head. Rolls hit the deck at the 15-second mark. With the coolness of a true professional, however, Rolls got back on his feet and survived the round. He constantly backed away from Tyson, and whenever the kid from Catskill tried to move in close, Rolls tied him up like a Christmas package. In fact, Tyson wasn't able to drop his man again in the fight, but he did come away with a 3-round decision, advancing him to the semi-finals. Tyson himself confessed to some nervousness before the Rolls fight. He said, "I was nervous, but I'm always nervous before a fight. When I step into the ring, it all goes away. I've been working towards this for a long time now, and I'm ready." Mike's confessed stage fright is a common malady affecting most professional performers. On Saturday, June 9th, Mike stepped into the ring to face tough Henry Milligan. As ABC cameras whirred away incessantly, Milligan from Delaware was a street fighter, but on this day he was no match for the excited Tyson. With all the exuberance of youth, Mike pursued his blonde-haired foe from corner to corner, and he carried the first round easily with his aggressiveness. In round 2, Mike dropped the Princeton University graduate for an 8 count, and a few seconds later put him down again to end the fight. The victory put the Catskill boxer into the finals against the wily veteran Henry Tillman, who was 6 years his senior. Mike Tyson was now only 9 minutes away from the Olympics. But 9 minutes can be a lifetime in a boxing ring. Tillman was a classy, experienced boxer with good lateral movement and an outstanding jab. He was not about to mix it up with the New York boy wonder. He would not stand in front of Tyson and let Mike pound away at him. Tillman's strategy was to keep moving for the entire 9 minutes, so Mike could not draw a bead on him. In round 1 of the fight, Tillman jabbed and moved, deftly avoiding Mike's wild rushes for the first 2 minutes. Near the end of the round, Mike trapped Tillman on the ropes and knocked him down with a sizzling right hand to the head. The Californian was stunned by the blow, but his experience saved him from further trouble. He was fully composed as he got to his feet and danced away from his 17-year-old adversary until his head cleared. Surprisingly, Tillman won the round because he had scored the greater number of punches. Knockdowns received no more points than a light jab in amateur boxing, and Henry Tillman had landed dozens of light jabs. In round 2, Tillman managed to keep his distance and again won the round with a constant barrage of flicking jabs, punches that would almost be ignored by professional judges. But again, in the amateurs, it's not how hard you hit, but how often you hit that counts. Cus D'Amato was openly concerned in the corner between rounds. He counselled his fighter to be aggressive in round 3 and go for a knockout. He knew that Tillman's jabs had piled up a lot of points for him in the first 2 rounds, and he didn't expect to get any favours from the Olympic judges whom he had criticised in the past. Mike would have to win big in order to be awarded the victory. A knockout would assure it. Mike moved quickly in round 3 and put immediate pressure on his taller opponent. He chased his man around the ring for the 3-4 minutes, but was unable to trap him. Henry Tillman's extensive ring savvy allowed him to escape from Mike time after time. The difference in experience between the two men was obvious to most observers. The smooth-working Tillman made the teenage Tyson look clumsy and undisciplined, while Tillman himself appeared to be a skilled professional. Mike had put on a strong showing, one that would have given him a victory in a professional ring. His corner was quietly confident as the fight ended. Mike had been the aggressor throughout, had landed the harder punches, and had scored the only knockdown of the fight. Tillman, on the other hand, had exhibited greater ring skills and a very effective jab. The judges had a difficult decision to make. Cus, Kevin and Mike felt that they had won the fight, but victory didn't come. Henry Tillman was awarded the decision, while the Tyson corner fumed. True to the feelings of all losers, Kevin Rooney bellowed, "We were robbed. That's all there is to it." Perhaps he was right, because the crowd loudly booed the vote of the judges. D'Amato, a controversial character for over 30 years, took the decision as a personal attack on himself. He felt it was a political decision rendered by individuals who had an axe to grind with him. Mike stood in his corner, weeping softly, his arms hanging limply by his side, and his head on his chest in a state of apparent shock. His dream of Olympic gold had suddenly disappeared in the hazy blue light of the Texas auditorium. In the dressing room, Tyson bared his soul about the moment. He said, "It's a disaster. What can I say? I feel terrible. I wanted so much to represent my country in the Olympics. All the kids look up to the Olympic fighters, and I wanted to set a good example for them." Kevin Rooney had the last word on the subject. "We'll be back. There's no question about it." That statement in itself told a lot about the philosophy of the Tyson camp. You can knock them down, but you can't beat them. They will always bounce back because they believe they are the best, and the best will always be victorious in the end. Mike and his managers accepted the loss as an educational tool, a character builder. They lost because they did something wrong, not because they met a better boxer. They would retreat to the gym and regroup. They would study the films of the fight, see the mistakes and correct them. The next time Henry Tillman would not get away so lucky. Mike still had one more chance to represent the USA in the Olympics. He was scheduled to fight Olin Alexander in a heavyweight elimination bout in Colorado Springs on June the 29th. If he beat Alexander, he would advance to the Olympic box office in Las Vegas, Nevada on July the 6th. As fate would have it, he would meet Henry Tillman again. If Tyson could defeat Tillman, the two men would have go at it for a third time the following day in order to determine the American heavyweight representative. Mike's dream could still come true, but it was a long way off, and there were a lot of mountains to climb before it became a reality. Cus D'Amato had less than 3 weeks to eliminate the spectre of defeat from Tyson's mind and prepare him for the new battles ahead. Cus's teachings had already laid the groundwork for this eventuality. In the D'Amato Book of Knowledge, Mike did not lose to Tillman because he was an inferior fighter. He lost because he did not follow D'Amato's instructions. He made mistakes. It is easier to correct mistakes than it is to rebuild a fighter's shattered confidence, of course. Mike was still confident that he could go all the way to the Olympics, but he had to go back to basics in the gym first. He had to work on his strategy and concentrate on Cus's instructions. He had to eliminate his previous mistakes. The Tyson training camp moved to Colorado Springs 3 weeks before the fight to get acclimatized to the Colorado environment and to fine-tune Mike's conditioning program. Mike was scheduled to spar with super heavyweight Tyrell Biggs in the 3 weeks prior to the Alexander match, but Biggs was a no-show. He arrived only days before the fight, forcing Mike to condition himself as best as he could without any actual ring combat. He concentrated instead on the other aspects of the physical fitness program, including calisthenics, shadow boxing, and a lot of work on the bags, the heavy bag, the speed bag, and the slip bag. His ring work was restricted to light workouts with a light heavyweight fighter. But most importantly, Cus worked on Tyson's emotional state of mind and on his ring strategy. June 29th arrived soon enough, and Mike was ready, physically and mentally. He cleared across the ring at Olin Alexander during the introductions, looking very much like a man in a trance, and determined to make the fight a short one. Mike swarmed all over the California heavyweight immediately and buried him under a deluge of punches that seemed to come from all directions. Alexander was no match for the enraged Mike, and he meekly succumbed to the fusillade of blows at 2 minutes and 6 seconds of the first round, sending Tyson on to Las Vegas and a rematch with Henry Tillman. There would be no excuses this time. The better man would win. On July the 6th, Caesar's Palace was all aglitter. It was a festive occasion in this city of tinsel and sequins. An Olympic box-off and the neon capital of the West basked in the national spotlight. Boxing fans filled the sports pavilion, decked out in their formal tuxedos and the finest gowns. ABC TV was on hand to transmit the account of the fight across the country, and every celebrity in town made it a point to attend the gala event. The dressing room was buzzing with activity an hour before the big fight, and the Tyson group was brimming with confidence. Tyson said, "I'm going to win the fight, and that's all there is to it. I made some mistakes down at Fort Worth, but I've learned from those mistakes. I've been working hard out here, and I'm ready." Trainer Kevin Rooney nodded in agreement. Cus D'Amato provided additional insight into their pre-fight strategy. He said, "We had that fight videotaped, and we studied it for hours. We know that Tillman is going to try and run again, only this time Mike will be able to cut him off and land his punches." The two fighters entered the ring amidst the bold intrusion of the television cameras and the constant babble of the ringside announcers. Both men looked ready for battle as soon as they bounded up and down in the corners. The perspiration covering the bodies was a telltale sign that they had warmed up vigorously in the dressing room before entering the pavilion. Perhaps Mike left his fight in the locker room. Perhaps the gold and glitter of Las Vegas overwhelmed the young gladiator. Whatever the reason, Mike didn't follow his fight plan, while Henry Tillman did exactly as he had promised. The tall, well-built Californian kept Tyson at bay with a constant barrage of stinging left jabs. His stand-up style made the stylish six-footer appear to tower over his smaller, crouching foe. Henry Tillman danced and jabbed. He moved quickly side to side, ever circling, keeping away from Tyson's amateurish charges. Mike was unable to cut off the ring and the cagey veteran, and he never got close enough to his man to throw many punches. As a result, it was a dull round, and it was Tillman's round thanks to his constant irritating jab. Round 2 was a carbon copy of round 1. Despite the pleading of cornerman Kevin Rooney, Mike was unable to execute the manoeuvres he had worked on during training camp. Henry Tillman remained the elusive spirit, darting to and fro, laying occasional soft jabs on the Tyson counterance. Then floating away, out of danger. It was another slow round. It was also another round for Henry Tillman. As the final round began, Mike needed a knockout to win. 1 minute into the round, the Catskill clubber caught Tillman with a sharp right hand, knocking the graceful boxer into the ropes. Tillman had the presence of mind to slip off the ropes, however, and escape further damage, though Tyson kept up his pursuit. Later in the round, Mike scored with another solid right that jarred his opponent, but the bell sounded before he could press his advantage. The controversial decision in favour of Tillman left Mike numb and distressed in his corner, and brought 3,089 catcalls from the spectators who thought Mike had won the fight. 2 judges awarded the decision to Tillman by a 60-57 count. 2 other judges voted for Tillman 58-57. A lone dissenter gave Tyson the nod, also by a 58-57 count. Tyson was dejected. He said, "I knew I won the fight. When we were waiting in the middle of the ring, one of the judges even winked at me and said, 'Great job.' When I heard the decision, I was stunned. I just couldn't believe it." Trainer Kevin Rooney was straight to the point. "I'll just let the fight speak for itself. Mike was robbed. That's my official statement." Later in the dressing room, Rooney thought back on Mike's hard right hand in the 3rd round, and he said, "It was a good punch, but it just missed the mark. If it had landed clean, the fight would have been over. When I saw Mike land that second good right hand, I thought it was over. I didn't see how they could give the fight to Tillman. But I've been around boxing too long to take anything for granted, and I had a gut feeling Mike wouldn't get the decision." While Rooney was dealing with the press, his distraught fighter slipped out of the arena, made his way across a field, and hid behind a large tree where he screamed in anguish, venting his frustration and grief in a bitter solitude. July 6, 1984 was the low point of Mike's career. He would not represent his country in the Olympics. His crusade had ended in failure. He had faced the trial, and he was found wanting. It was not his skill or his courage that let him down. It was his youth and his inexperience that caused his downfall. But he would overcome those shortcomings in the months ahead. Mike Tyson did receive one measure of consolation from the competition. He was selected as an alternate on the Olympic team, and as such, he would train with the other Olympians in Colorado Springs for the next 3 weeks and accompany the team to Los Angeles in August. If Henry Tillman was to be injured or take ill prior to the Olympics, Mike would become the American torchbearer in the heavyweight division. And somewhere down the road in the near future, Mike Tyson would turn professional and take aim at Mount Everest of boxing, the coveted heavyweight championship of the world. He said, "I'm going to turn pro, but I'm not sure when. I might stay around for the World Amateur Championships in November. I'd like one more chance to show everyone that I'm the best in the world. I'll have to talk to Cus, of course. The final decision is up to him." Even though Mike had lost 2 fights to Henry Tillman within a space of 4 weeks, he never doubted his superiority. He had lost because he had made mistakes, not because Tillman was the better fighter. As Rooney reminded everybody, he's an 18-year-old kid, and people forget that. He's only had 25 amateur fights, and he almost made the Olympic team. That's a commendable job, any way you look at it. From another point of view, the 2 losses to Henry Tillman may have been more important to the advancement of Mike's career than any of his spectacular victories. Although Mike had made great strides in controlling his emotions in the ring, thanks to the guidance of Cus D'Amato, he was still underprepared for the professional ranks. His string of easy knockouts in the amateurs made him arrogant and difficult to control. He felt invincible and viewed his opponents with utter disdain, making life difficult for D'Amato and Rooney in the gym. Mike was often AWOL during training sessions, and as a result, he wasn't able to stay in peak physical condition, often coming into fights 8 to 10 pounds overweight. Teddy Atlas was aware of these problems, and his attempt to correct them had led to his falling out with D'Amato. The 2 losses to Tillman helped snap Mike out of his sloppy training habits. He knew now that he was not unbeatable, and he committed himself to perfecting his physical condition and his mental attitude. He listened more closely to the instructions of his trainer and his mentor. His work habits improved. He trained hard day in, day out. Mike Tyson had finally put himself on the yellow brick road that led to the Emerald City and Larry Holmes' championship belt. He would not lose another boxing match, either amateur or professional, until he had won and unified the heavyweight title. In early August, the Olympics were in full swing, and American boxers acquitted themselves admirably. They brought home an impressive 9 gold medals, even without Mike Tyson. Mark Breland, the 147-pound sensation from Brooklyn, who had compiled an amazing 110-1 amateur record, dazzled his Asian opponent, Young Soo, in the finals to dance away with a 5-0 decision. Henry Tillman proved his right to be the American representative by upsetting the world amateur heavyweight champion Willie DeWitt of Canada, thereby reserving an April decision in the World Championships. Pernell Whitaker, a 20-year-old lightweight from Norfolk, Virginia, KO'd Luis Ortiz at 2 minutes and 15 seconds of round 2. Paul Gonzalez won the 106-pound title in a walkover. Mike watched from the wings, proud of his teammates, but pensive as he imagined himself on the podium, bending slightly from the waist as the gold medal was hung around his neck. It would have been a dream come true, but of course it never happened. On Monday, August the 13th, Mike returned to Catskill, New York to get on with the rest of his life. He sat in the living room of the big white house discussing his future with Cus D'Amato and his adopted mother, Camille Lerold. The decision had been made. Mike would aim toward the National Amateur Championships in August and then would compete in the European Championships in October. Shortly thereafter, probably in late November, Mike would take the big plunge and make his professional debut in Albany, New York. The first step towards the Nationals was the Empire State Games in Syracuse. Mike hadn't done much boxing as an Olympic alternate, but he did keep in shape with a lot of running and was anxious to get started again. On Friday, August 17th, Mike stepped into the ring in the Carrier Dome to square off against Ian Berkeley in a semi-final match. Mike was obviously ring rusty, and his punches were often wild, and his timing was off, but his aggressiveness carried him to a decision. The next day, in the finals, Mike was opposed by Winston Bent. During the pre-fight instructions, the 2 men had to be separated, as open warfare almost broke out before the first bell had even sounded. Cus D'Amato, of course, blamed Bent for the confrontation. He said this fella began to stare at him in a very aggressive way. Once the real fight started, Mike moved forward relentlessly. His bobbing and weaving tactics caused Bent to miss numerous punches, frustrating the more experienced adversary. According to D'Amato, Bent's frustration reached a point where he actually bit Mike in the second round. Mike was dominating the fight midway through round 3 when he saw an opening and nailed Bent with a devastating right hand. Bent collapsed in a heap on the floor and took the full count as Tyson jumped with joy. It was his first knockout in almost 2 months. The King was back. The national championships in Lake Placid, New York, where Mike's next stopover was, brought together the top 120 fighters from around the country. Mike drew a bye all the way to the finals. In spite of his Olympic disappointment, Mike reached the Lake Placid event with impressive credentials. He had won the 1983 US Junior Championships. He had won the 1984 National Golden Gloves Championship and walked off with the tournament's Most Outstanding Boxer award. He was also the silver medalist in the 1984 Olympic box-off and served as an alternate at the Olympic Games in Los Angeles. He was definitely a force to be reckoned with in Lake Placid. As it turned out, Mike's opponent in the finals was a big Texan and another adversary from the Junior Olympic days, Kelton Brown. Mike had faced Brown in the finals of the 1982 competition in Colorado Springs. In that encounter, Mike had disposed of his adversary quickly in the first round. However, 2 years had now passed since that bout, and Brown's progress was unknown to Mike's crew. Obviously, Brown had more than held his own against the competition in the heavyweight ranks, as evidenced by his appearance in the national finals. Kelton Brown, remember, was a big heavyweight, 6'7" tall, and a bulky 300 pounds. Tyson didn't spar during the week, but worked out diligently in the gym, and by fight time he was raring to go. The kid from Catskill moved to the centre of the ring quickly when the fight started, and scored with a left hook to the body that left the Texan gasping for air. The referee immediately made Brown take a standing 8 count, while a patient Mike Tyson watched on. When the action resumed, Tyson jolted Brown with a jarring right hook to the side of the head. The referee interrupted the fight to give the day's fighter another standing 8 count. Before the fight resumed, a timeout was called to repair a loose ring rope, giving an unsteady Brown an additional 20-second respite. But the extra rest didn't help the young man from Dallas. Tyson mounted another attack as soon as the referee turned him loose, and a rapid-fire combination of punches brought an end to the fight. It had lasted only 2 minutes and 33 seconds. It was evident that Mike's amateur career was rapidly drawing to a close. There were very few worlds left for him to conquer in the non-professional arena. Not only did Mike win another national championship, but he also walked away with the Outstanding Boxer award again. Such things were becoming a habit with him. Mike's trainer, Cus D'Amato, was justifiably happy with his young fighter's performance in Lake Placid. He said, "Well, I was very impressed. He reminded me of a modern-day Jack Dempsey. He's awesome. I think Mike is ready to turn pro. He probably will enter the European Championships in Finland in October and then turn pro in December. I suspect that all the countries that didn't come to the Olympics will go to Finland. Mike will be able to get a good experience fighting the fighters from the Soviet bloc countries. They're a strong group." After a week's vacation, Mike was back at work in Redmond's Hall, sparring and working on the bags. His last preparatory program was beginning. Soon he would be fighting for money. Cus D'Amato had the usual difficulty of hiring sparring partners for the precocious destroyer of men, and he said it was because of his punching power. It's difficult to get people to spar with him. Cus was fortunate to obtain the services of a tough heavyweight named Mohammed Hussein for a week. The 27-year-old Hussein had been in the ring with the best, including champion Larry Holmes, and his professional record totaled over 30 fights. Trainer Kevin Rooney noted, however, that the main emphasis in the training camp was not on Mike's physical condition, but rather on his mental outlook. He said, "Mike runs about 3 miles every day, but it doesn't mean anything. We have to prepare his mind. If he's not ready to fight mentally, he can get in there with a lesser fighter and he'll get knocked out." Mike certainly wasn't overwhelmed by the prospect of travelling to Helsinki to fight the capable boxers from Russia and Hungary. He said, "I look at it as any other trip. I look forward to any trip, but I don't make one any more prestigious." One of the physical qualities that D'Amato worked on with his fighter was Tyson's movement. He wanted to get Mike to move more after he punched so he wouldn't have to take a punch in return. Punch but don't get hit yourself. That's the name of the game, isn't it? D'Amato pushed his protege to the limit, continually forcing him to stretch his horizons in order to achieve new goals. D'Amato realised that Mike's biggest need was actual ring experience. Because of his awesome talent, Mike's 25 or so amateur fights lasted an average of only 1 round. It's hardly enough time for Mike to work up a sweat, let alone accumulate any experience. So, it was that sparring that became a critical part of his boxing development. The brawling Mohammed Hussein gave Mike a good workout for several days. But even the former 1980 British national boxing champion wilted under the relentless pressure put on by the energetic young bull. After one 4-round workout, Mike offered to spar another round with the embattled Hussein, but Muhammad graciously declined the offer. Before leaving Catskill to fulfill other commitments, Hussein provided the press with his valued opinion of the New York Titan. He said, very strong. He just needs experience. There's no doubt he's excellent for his age. He could make it. At this point, he's very quick. I just hope he keeps up that speed when he turns pro. Most amateurs slow down when they turn pro because the fights last longer and they have to pace themselves. Cus D'Amato assured everyone that Tyson would not lose any of his quickness when he turned pro. He said, the public don't realise his accomplishments. Someday in the future, the town of Catskill will be put on the map. D'Amato was not accompanying Mike and his trainer Kevin Rooney to Helsinki. The next time Cus would work with Mike would be November, and the programme would be directed towards Mike's professional debut. But first things first, and before Mike could turn professional, he had to get through the tough European Championships. On October the 12th, a small group of Tyson supporters, including Cus D'Amato, travelled to Kennedy International Airport in New York City to see Mike off on his first international adventure. Mike and Kevin Rooney arrived in Helsinki about mid-morning on the 13th and spent the entire day relaxing around the hotel, shaking off the effects of the jet lag. There was a 6-hour time difference between New York and Finland, with Helsinki being 6 hours later, and it usually took a day or two for a person to adjust to his new eating and sleeping schedules. It was like learning to stay up all night and going to bed at 5 a.m. rather than 11 p.m. Quite a radical change for someone with a boxer's discipline and training habits. As the tournament time approached, Mike's adrenaline started pumping furiously, and he began to generate the nervous energy that was so important to his success in the ring. But Mike still had not adjusted to the time difference between the United States and Europe, to the unusual surroundings and to the Scandinavian food. After the tournament, he would confess, I didn't fight up to par, mostly because I didn't feel so well. In any case, he approached the tournament in a positive frame of mind. The participating countries included the Soviet Union, Korea, Sweden, Hungary, Finland, Denmark, Czechoslovakia, England, China and Bulgaria. Most of the non-American fighters followed the more classical approach to boxing, being stand-up fighters with the predictable ring strategy of a John L. Sullivan. Tyson looked forward to the challenge of competing against these fighters and matching his style and boxing philosophy with theirs. His first match, scheduled for Friday the 19th of October, was against a Finnish boxer, but as he warmed up in his dressing room prior to the fight, he was informed that his opponent was ill and he refused to fight. Mike only had to enter the ring and walk across to his opponent's corner when the bell sounded to be awarded the victory. His next fight, a semi-final encounter, took place the following day. Waiting for Mike in the ring was Istvan Sigora, a veteran Hungarian fighter who was all business. His mind was focused on only one thing, winning the match. It was obvious that Sigora would be a tough opponent, and he was tough. Tyson pursued him relentlessly for 3 rounds, and when he caught up with his man, he was able to get in some punishing blows. He hurt Sigora on several occasions, but the big Hungarian took the lever and stood his ground. He even returned some effective punches of his own. Still, Mike was awarded a lopsided 3-round decision. Trainer Kevin Rooney admired the European's toughness. He said, Sigora was a good fighter. The guy took them like a seasoned pro. He took Michael's best shots. That was good to have a guy fight back. This guy stood there and took it, but Michael won easy. It had been a good match for Tyson. He had a vigorous workout and came away victorious and unhurt. He was ready for Sunday's final, his last step towards winning the European Championship, the 7th International TAMA tournament as it was officially known. On Sunday, Mike found himself in hostile territory. His opponent in the finals was a big blonde Swedish Adonis, 6'5" Hakan Brock. Brock had pulled off the upset of the tournament when he decisioned the favoured Russian boxer in the semi-finals. As a fellow Scandinavian, Brock was immediately adopted by the Finnish fans as one of their own. The arena erupted in a wild display of emotion when Brock came into view and made his way down the aisle to the ring. Conversely, Tyson's arrival was greeted with a smattering of applause and a few isolated catcalls. The cool reception didn't deter the Catskill heavyweight from his self-appointed task, however. He had committed himself to bring home the title, and he was emotionally prepared for any contingency. During the referee's instruction, the tall Swede towered over his diminutive foe like Goliath espying David. From ringside seats, the fight looked like a mismatch. How could the tiny American possibly stand up to the power of the Scandinavian strongman? The large crowd actually felt sorry for Mike Tyson, but the 18-year-old New Yorker had a surprise in store for them. At the bell, Tyson moved forward like a man on a mission. He quickly muscled the tall Swede back against the ropes and unleashed a torrid body attack. The crowd gasped in disbelief as the short, squat American pounded the midsection of the 6'5" Scandinavian giant with short, powerful, devastating punches. Brock winced with each thunderous shot to the ribcage. Bright red welts appeared on his milk-white skin. After what seemed like an eternity, Brock managed to move off the ropes and escape his tormentor's clutches. He backpedaled out of danger, trying to catch his breath at the same time. Tyson stalked him again, but Hakan Brock had had enough of close combat with the Catskill bomber. He had met Mike toe-to-toe, and he didn't like the results. For the rest of the fight, Mike chased and Hakan Brock ran. Brock survived the fight, but lost the decision. Surviving was a hollow victory to be sure, but one that the big Swede felt was preferable to being KO'd. His performance reminded boxing scholars of another Swedish amateur boxer, Ingemar Johansson, who had humiliated his country and himself in the 1952 Olympics by being disqualified for not fighting. Kevin Rooney shook his head in disgust at Brock's effort. He said, "The guy didn't want to fight." But again, Michael closed the show nice. All in all, it was a nice experience. Mike and Kevin relaxed in Helsinki for a couple of days to savour their satisfying victory and to recover from the mental and physical strain of the previous week. While they rested, they took a tour of the ancient city founded by King Gustavus in 1550 AD. They were fascinated by the 400-year-old buildings, the tiny winding streets, and the picturesque waterfront area. As they stared out at the cold, dark blue waters of the Gulf of Finland, they may or may not have realised that less than 50 miles away, across the vast watery wasteland, lay the country of Russia, perennial adversary of their homeland. Mike was welcomed back to Catskill with open arms by his vast legion of friends. Foremost among the crowd was Cus D'Amato, his manager, trainer, companion, and adopted father. Cus was beaming with pride as he squeezed his boy in a giant bear hug. No words were exchanged, but the looks that passed between the two spoke volumes. The love and respect they had for each other was evident in their eyes. Mike had a few more days of rest before he had to go back to work in the gym. He enjoyed the break from the rigours of training, and he made the most of his time off to see all of his friends and have a good time. He spent one day travelling to Brooklyn to visit some of his childhood buddies. Cus chauffeured him to the town of Hudson, where he boarded the Amtrak for the Big Apple. A short subway ride beneath the concrete facade of the city subsequently delivered him to Brownsville, where he had wasted several years of his youth in adolescence. He and some of his old friends sat at one of the local fast food joints eating burgers, guzzling cokes, and bringing each other up to date on what had transpired since the last get-together. A few hours in the depressing environment, however, was more than the Brooklyn escape he could take, and he was happy to get back to his new home in Catskill and to his new friends. For the next 3 days, he pigged out on the good life. He and his buddies travelled to the Crossgates Mall in Guilderland to see the latest Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, The Terminator, and to frequent McDonald's, Burger Chef, Ben & Jerry's ice cream, and other fast food joints that operated within the shopping complex. One of the favourite pastime activities was hanging around the indoor complex and trying to pick up girls. It was a lot of fun staring at all the pretty bodies that wiggled their way through the mall, and it gave the boys a macho feeling to make sly comments as the teeny boppers passed. At times, his extracurricular activities interfered with his training regime. When that happened, Cus D'Amato would sit Mike down and remind him of his primary objective, winning the professional heavyweight boxing title. Mike understood his mission, and he was dedicated to it, so he always followed Cus's advice. Girls and socialising would have to be secondary for the present. The title quest came first. The CBS television sports team came to town to film a special programme on the Catskill Boxing Club. Television meant exposure. Exposure meant more recognition, and recognition meant more money for a young aspiring professional boxer. Cus knew all the angles, as did his partner Jim Jacobs. Cus knew how to prepare his fighter to be successful in the ring, and Jim Jacobs knew how to get publicity and market fighters to make the most money. Cus imparted some of his philosophy to the enthralled CBS reporters. He said, "I owned and operated a gym in New York City for many years. One day, Floyd Patterson walked through my doors and I started training him. I have all my fighters right from the start. If they can fight, I keep them. If they can't, I tell them to retire. 90% of juvenile problems are caused by 10% of the people. By providing a positive occupation, I develop boxing careers as well as help to keep Catskill's youth in line." Early in November, the Tyson Strategy Committee sat down to map out their future plans. Cus D'Amato travelled to New York City to meet with Jim Jacobs and Bill Caton. It was evident that Mike would have to turn pro now. He had run rugged through the amateur ranks, except for the disappointment, of course, of the Olympic trials. He had crushed everyone in his path. He had racked up a total of 5 national titles, including the 1984 National Golden Gloves Championship, and he had added the 1984 European Championship as well. In effect, Mike Tyson was the world's reigning amateur heavyweight king. Now it was time to move on to bigger and better things. Mike's overall amateur record was certainly impressive. He compiled a win-loss record of 38-6, with 31 knockouts, 21 of them coming in the first round. The question his managers had asked themselves was, how far can Mike Tyson go in the pros? And it's at this moment, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to pause and end episode 2 of the Mike Tyson Career Profile. I hope you guys have thoroughly enjoyed it. 2 parts of Mike Tyson's career profile, primarily focused on his childhood years and now his amateur career. At this point, we're going into part 3, starting his professional career. Feels mad, doesn't it? Feels mad that we've done 2 parts already and we've only just getting into the pros. Well, that's how much detail we wanted to put into the Mike Tyson career profile, which is why we wanted to do it again. From the original episode in 2019-2020, we wanted to do it again in this storytelling format and provide you as much information as possible. And I hope this second part has given you a real insight into what Mike Tyson did as an amateur and his ups and, of course, his downs and the disappointment of not making the Olympic team and how all that transpired. But look at his amateur record. Think about the lack of fights really he had in comparison to some of the fighters that go on to have over 100 fights, and yet he picked up multiple national titles. Quite impressive that. Quite impressive indeed. So if you've enjoyed part 2 of the Mike Tyson career profile, please, as always, do let us know on social media. You can let us know at BTR Boxing Podcast on any of the available platforms out there. If you are listening on Spotify, leave a comment. If you've listened to this on YouTube, leave a comment below, or any of the podcasting apps, whichever one you listen to. If it's got a comments facility, please make sure that you drop in a comment in below and letting us know. Big thanks to our story writer Hassan for again brilliantly putting together the episode. I've really enjoyed putting this out there for you guys. I've really enjoyed delivering more intricate details about Mike Tyson and his amateur career. But as we head into part 3, it's now time to get serious. It's now time to get in his professional career and really look at the ups and the downs. And there's obviously so many stories to tell, so many moments, notable moments that, of course, are going to shape the future parts for the Mike Tyson career profile. Thank you so much for listening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you've enjoyed part 2 of the Mike Tyson career profile on the BTR Boxing Podcast Network.